Hello and welcome to the Jackcast, your Swansea City podcast. I'm Matt Barocco and I'm joined as ever by Steve Carroll. Evening, Steve.
Evening.
And we're delighted to welcome back Stuart James, a regular guest on the pod. Evening, Stu.
Evening, Matt. Evening, Steve. Great to be back on. Thank you for having me.
Happy new season to you.
And to you too.
So we've got plenty to talk about, Stu. I know you were hoping to join us last week for our season preview pod, but we'll have a little chat about how you think the summer's gone. In general, since Michael Duff's come in, it was a bit of a turbulent start of the summer, I think it's fair to say, isn't it, with the Russell Martin saga? And, that dragged on forever, didn't it?
Yeah, that was a really frustrating period, wasn't it? Because everybody knew that Russell Martin was going. And it just went on and on and on. And we clearly spoke to a number of people as well. And it wasn't clear for a little while who would be coming in. And that makes you anxious. And then obviously Michael Duff's name emerged. And your worry, I think, always with these things is, I think if you have the scenario where the players come back for pre-season and a manager isn't in place, it just doesn't look good and it doesn't set a good tone. And we had this a little while back, didn't we, when Steve Cooper departed, and you've got all that upheaval then, and the players are wondering what's happening. So I think we did it just in the nick of time, didn't we? He came in, and then 24 hours later, sort of Duff was meeting the players. So that was all good, and then there was a flurry of signings. I seem to think we had 3 in fairly quickly, and then it sort of quietened down for a little bit, as it does at times. And all in all, I think it's been really good. We're obviously still crying out for that left-sided defensive player, but I think we can all be encouraged by the other business we've done. And obviously the big question is what happens between now and the end of the window in terms of probably 2 players in particular, Matt Grimes and Joel Perreault.
Yeah, it just feels different, doesn't it, Steve? I mean, in terms of how we've done our business, particularly since I've been doing this pod, it doesn't be something we've really had our hand. It seemed to have been a poison chalice for this club, really, because I think it started doing it during the part where we started nosediving down the Premier League, and maybe since then our business has been a bit haphazard, all over the shop, last minute things. With Stu, I remember you did a piece before, or you spoke about it before, of the amount of business we've done on deadline day. And Steve, this summer seems to be, we're actually getting it done early on and getting the business and getting players in the door before that mad rush.
Yeah, I think quite often we've been reactive, haven't we, rather than proactive. That's probably the best way of describing it. Maybe waiting for 1 or 2 to leave before bringing people in, and then your top targets have gone, really, haven't they? So we have been better this time. I think we have probably backed this manager quicker than we have most of the others under this regime, really. So it does feel a bit more promising. Obviously, there's another couple of weeks to go, isn't it? But as Stuart said, that left back is, still a huge priority, really. But, I think when we made those couple of signings in the week before the season started, it just gave you that hope then, didn't it? That, we weren't going to have such an unbalanced team going into the first game. And that was the case, really, then, wasn't it? So, yeah, I think there's certainly reasons to be positive. As ever, we'll see where we're at when we at the end of the window. I think there's more come-ins and go-ins to be had. So, but it certainly feels a bit more positive than what we've had in the past. And I think you do wonder if Russell Martin's looking at this and thinking, well, why didn't I have this level of backing, because I would have been more successful.
What's going on, Stu? I mean, I look across the Championship and 6 or 7 different clubs. I think if you did this level of business 12 months ago, you'd have walked into the playoffs. It was such a poor division and nobody seemed to get their shit in order. And now this summer, everyone's going out making big eye-catching signings, and we're one of those clubs, of course. But I'm looking at it thinking, I'm not just the only fan here who's thinking, if we'd done this 12 months ago, some of these players came in 12 months ago, it would have been a different story.
Oh, 100%. And it was interesting talking to Nigel Pearson the week before last, and he agreed that it was a stronger Championship than we've had for many years because of the calibre of teams that have come up and also the calibre of teams that have come down from the Premier League. But he was talking about genuinely believing that Bristol City could get to the playoffs, and he was highlighting Luton, their story last season, and how that's kind of given everyone hope. And I don't mean that disrespectfully about Luton, but I don't think any of us would have thought they would have been in the playoffs, let alone winning promotion. So It feels like it does feel like a really competitive division this year. Yeah, there absolutely is frustration in terms of us, because you think, what did we miss out by 3 points in the end last season, and yet we didn't sign anyone in January and we lost 2 or 3. So it'd be fascinating to see how it goes. I watched little bits of the games, the other games last week. Saw Southampton obviously on Friday being very dominant, as we'd expect, with Russell Martin in charge, and then saw a little bit of Leicester on Sunday. I did look at Leicester and think, crikey, you've got a bloody good squad there. The quality of players they have, and someone like Dewsbury Hall, I thought was a really good player in the Premier League. Single-handedly turning that game on its head the other day. So yeah, for us, I think it's been really good. And as Steve rightly points out, that's the big thing about being proactive. If we hark back, and we don't want to particularly, but to where it all started going wrong in the Premier League, we were waiting for people to go, weren't we? We think about Sigurdsson, stuff like that, and then we suddenly start doing signings we shouldn't do. And so now it kind of feels that we might have already signed some people for people who could potentially go. But I do think it's absolutely key that we bring in a left wing back as soon as possible, because I just feel that will give the team so much more balance, and I think it will probably help the way that Duff wants to play as well. I just felt there were times, and I know we'll come on to Birmingham, but on the weekend where Josh Key did really well on the left and he was super positive, but he came inside an awful lot. And I think if we could just have a left wing back there who can let the ball go across their body, sliding balls down the side for Yates to sort of run onto, or Perot or Ginelli if it's him playing, then I think that will they'll just give the team, as I say, a lot more balance. So it'd be great to get that signing over the line soon. Yeah,
definitely. And then you have to trust that considering the business we've done already, and it's all gone very quietly under the radar. One link we'll talk about shortly today, again, completely out of the blue. So, I mean, stuff like this, the club has really closed ranks on because we used to get rumours if left, right and centre long before any bid seemed to go in. But now we're just not hearing about anything until it's pretty much done, which is really impressive from the club's perspective. But one of the ones we were talking about last week, which was perhaps a little less easy for them to keep under wraps after some eagle-eyed fans spotted a corner of an arm in a training picture, was Harrison Ashby, who came in eventually. We thought he might come in while we were recording the last pod, didn't he? But he came in the day after from Newcastle on loan, and that was to cover the other side, the right wing back. We also already bought Josh Key in, but he'd shown in pre-season he could fill in at the left side. So we'll talk about the Birmingham game in a bit, but that's a really positive move from the club to bring in someone as highly rated as him for a year.
Yeah, I think so. And as you say, it gives you that options then, doesn't it? We still, as we've said, we need that left back, but we now have. We were able then to move an actual wing back, maybe slightly out of position to another wing back, as opposed to last season playing a centre back at wing back, which we know really isn't the way to go. So it's better than that. We still do need to get a left wing back in, but look, once we've done that, and the fact is that I believe that we will, as opposed to last year thinking that we probably won't, and that's what winds you up. So like now they've sort of earned a bit some trust back, I think, with the things that they've done. So. Yeah, and I think once we're in that situation, we have 2 right backs then, we have 2 right wing backs, and the competition for places is key. I mean, we were discussing earlier, weren't we, about the fact that if Perot was to go, we've got a lot of forward players now, for example. So yeah, it does feel like things are coming together a bit, and it's not like last year where if Perot had got injured, we were
nothing in
very big trouble. I would have said in the second half of the season. Luckily for the owners, it didn't happen, but. It could have, and you get the feeling now if we were to have, there'd still be 1 or 2 players if we got injured, it would be concerning. But in a lot of positions now, there is more cover, so that's the important thing, isn't it? And Ashby is highly rated. Let's see how he gets on. But like I say, if he doesn't do well, Key is there as well, so they'll hopefully, having both of them there, will bring the best out of them, and they'll have to push each other to get in the team once a left back comes in.
Well, based on their cameos last night, I was thinking about this earlier, Stu, and based on their cameos last night, I was thinking, well, I wouldn't actually mind seeing Miko, let's call him Miko for the purposes of pronunciation's sake, and Giannelli playing up front together with obviously the massive frame of the Ukrainian striker, and then Giannelli was clearly got bags of pace in him, and as we saw last night, a bit of a shot. That big man, little man, kind of fast man running off the knockdowns, etc., etc. I wouldn't mind seeing that, but looking at the way the team is at the moment with Perot, Cullen and Yates, they're actually probably 4th and 5th in line, which speaks volumes, Steve. If I'm thinking I wouldn't mind seeing them two starting, and they're perhaps 4th and 5th in the pecking order at the moment, of how our business has gone in terms of strengthening that squad.
Yeah, and I think the nice thing with those players you've mentioned, Matt, is it feels like they've got very different attributes.
Yeah.
And I think in the past, sometimes we felt, God, wouldn't it be great to bring someone on with a bit of pace now? We really lack pace in the team all over the pitch last season. And that's certainly something that obviously Giannelli brings. I like the thought of having a big guy as well up front, or a big guy that you can bring on like Miko, who can just give you something different. I mean, I really enjoyed watching Ollie McBurney play in that first season we had back in the Championship, where I thought he led the line superbly. He was a real threat in the air. And sometimes when you're under pressure and you needed an out ball, he was someone who could make an average ball into a good ball. And I that's obviously not Joel Perot's game. It's not Cullen's game. They have a different skill set to that. So I think it's a really nice blend we've got there now. I think the thing with Miko at the minute is, as I understand it, he's had not much of a pre-season at all where he's been before. So he's clearly playing catch up, and they'll want to go so careful with him. He had his injuries last season on loan at Hibs, and that was clearly a problem then. So they'll be treading really carefully, I think, with him, and hopefully by the end of the month he'll be up to speed. I'd imagine he's almost doing a pre-season through August, really, a month late. And then obviously, unfortunately, Josh Giannelli picked up a calf injury, didn't he? I think early in pre-season, but obviously, as you point out, his cameo last night is hugely encouraging. And then in all of this, Liam Cullen, who could easily have been the forgotten man, and he was someone who I thought might be marginalised this season, not through anything to do with how he did last season, because he obviously scored some important goals and had a good impact on the team, but just naturally the number of attacking players, I thought he'd struggle for game time, but then he obviously comes on the weekend and helps to sort of turn that game really in terms of his brilliant delivery. So yeah, all of that is really interesting, and it will be intriguing to see what happens if Perot goes, whether we do bring in another forward, or if he thinks, well, no, we're fine with what we got.
It would be really interesting, and he would probably point towards, as Steve mentioned earlier, about us being proactive rather than reactive. And if we were to settle after potentially selling Perot, that would tell us all really that we were doing our business with that in mind, which, as much disappointing as it will be and gut-wrenching as it will be to lose Perot later on in the window, would point towards, Steve, a far more professional outfit here, that we aren't waiting till deadline day to get a tasty bid for someone, let him go, and then go, right, okay, let's do a deal for Wilfried Borneo and Andre Ayew and the stuff we did in the past, where you throw silly money at bad apples.
Well,
really,
we attempted it with Carl and Grant as well, didn't we? Don't forget. And
yeah.
Obviously that, I think through a little bit of luck, really, that didn't happen. So, yeah, it's just, we'd be in a position when we have Perot went on the deadline now where you wouldn't really have to panic as much, I wouldn't have thought. And if nobody came in, I'm not saying you jump for joy, but you think, well, we're not in a disastrous position. You certainly wouldn't be thinking, right, we have to sign someone. Like you mentioned the Boney one, for example. Llorente went on deadline day, and then you're like, well, we have to sign somebody. Like, otherwise we're going into a season with Tammy Abraham on his own first season at Premier League level. You're thinking, well, we've got to do something. Ideally, I certainly didn't want to buy Boney. I may have gone along with a loan move and thought, right, well, we'll go down that route because it's a lot less risky, but we felt like we had to do something, and you backed into a corner, aren't you? Whereas I don't feel like now we're as backed into a corner because we have been proactive. So it just shows you the difference that makes, really, then, doesn't it? So it's certainly the correct approach to make.
We got Paul Watson in from Luton, still came with a good CV and really well talked about in football circles by the sounds of things. And how much would you attribute to him and the mindset of the new investors that have come in? And we see obviously put in a fair bit of money each there to help back the club in strengthening. It does seem to be a different kind of way of working at the club now, not something we've seen in a long time.
Yeah, and I think obviously there was a big hole to fill there. Someone had to take control of that situation. Before Josh Marsh was obviously trying to do it to an extent, but how dispiriting must that be if you're identifying players as Swansea were in November, December, ready to go for January, and then you've got a load of targets there lined up, and then you can't sign any of them. And obviously there was a hell of a lot of criticism, rightly so, for the ownership group on the back of that dreadful January window. And it seems there's little point in bringing someone like Paul Watson in if you're not going to support him in his work. I think it's in fairness, I don't think it's an easy market at all. As you identified earlier, there's lots of championship clubs trying to strengthen. Realistically, there's lots of clubs competing for the same players. So that makes it hard, obviously, as well. So, yeah, credit to the club for the business they've done so far. I guess we've always got to be careful with these things, that we don't make judgments too quickly. I think one of the biggest problems in my industry at times in the media is trying to read a lot into a little. And I'm always cautious about that. It's like when you look at the players, how they perform on Saturday. Some of them were seeing for the first time new signings in a competitive game. And, I'd never want to be jumping, shouting from the rooftops about someone equally if someone had, I thought Ashby was fairly quiet on Saturday, but I would never dream of judging someone on, 60 minutes of football or whatever it is. So, I think there's a nice feeling around the club at the minute, rightly so, because we have got players in. We have improved in a number of positions where we were clearly short, the full-back areas. As Steve says, now we've got 2 at right back. We just get someone in on the left. And in terms of attacking players, that was something that I found really frustrating last season. I thought we just had a total lack of options. So, yes, well done to Paul Watson. And the club have. The club have clearly, I think they realised, that had to be a watershed moment, January. I know it was far from the first time it had happened, and we had heard before, there can't be a repeat of this. But had there been a repeat of this on the back of new investment, on the back of Paul Watson coming in, well, I think we'd have pretty much given up with it all then. So, good stuff so far, and hopefully we all still feel really upbeat when the window closes.
Yeah, fingers crossed. And let's get on to the start of the season, now the long-awaited. Well, we wanted this curtain raiser, Steve, because we were looking at it last week on the pod, don't we? And we were saying we've got a lot of new players to blood, a new manager, a completely new style of play. We understand the transition that we saw when Russell Martin took over from Steve Cooper. That never really fully clicked after 2 years. So we were going to see some teething problems over time here with Michael Duff. We had to expect it. But he's not chalk and cheese. He wants to, by his own admission, do a little bit in between. He doesn't want to go long ball, but at the same time, he wants to have the option to go a bit more direct if the option's there. So we were looking forward to this, but we also pointed out in last week's pod that Birmingham had a very strong window, arguably the strongest in the Championship, and they had a lot of debutants play. And we talked about both sets of players are going to want to impress their fans, aren't they? And, well, indeed, 2 debutants scored in a 1-1 draw.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't a classic, was it? I think both teams had their moments, really, but it did feel as if we were a new team with new players, and it was a little bit disjointed, if I'm honest. Some players maybe getting to know their new teammates and obviously adapting to being a little bit different, not trying to keep the ball as often maybe, and playing a bit forward more often. So, look, I think overall, I'm quite pleased to have come away with something, because I didn't think we were at our best, and obviously we were behind in the game. So, I think you've got to be realistic on the opening day. It's very rare you see a complete performance on an opening day. I can't think of many. Ironically, one of the best performances I've ever seen on the opening day was a game at Oldham, where we actually lost. Yeah,
I remember Oldham fans said that if we finish above Swansea this season, we'll be champions.
In all fairness, that. Well, yeah, we did go on to win the league, but at the same time, we gave away 2 horrendous goals. Yeah, and one of them was a penalty in the first minute. So, yeah, I think you don't get these polished performances often on day one, especially under a new regime. We've got to be patient, as Stephen said. You can't be judging people after an hour or 90 minutes or anything. It's just crazy. You've got to give people a reasonable chance. So, there's things to work on. There were positives. We did score a nice goal. Jerry Yates off the mark, isn't he? Cullen had a really good impact, I thought, when he came on. The Grimes pass which put Cullen through for the assist, obviously that was really good. So, when Rushworth made some good saves, I know obviously he'll take a little bit of the blame for the goal that we conceded, but I mean, he made a couple of saves, so instantly I'm thinking there's an upgrade.
Oh, it's a monumental upgrade. I don't think there's any doubt in Steve's head. I mean, we talked last winter, and I remember you saying, I think you were on this pod actually, where we said we may have to forego our bid for a striker because we obviously now are definitely going to put all our funds into getting a goalkeeper now Bender's out injured, and it's really hampered our plans. And we bring in a player who's never played a senior game in his life, and that was it. And we were just looking at it now and going, right, okay, so apparently now we're going to go with Andy Fisher for the rest of the season. And I looked at plenty of games between then and the summer and thought, do you know what? I'm not actually sure Andy Fisher wants to be playing, because he was obviously playing with so little confidence. And now just looking at Rushworth, even just the way, one of my mates said, even just the way Rushworth carries himself out there already just looks like he feels, I'm a very good goalkeeper. He holds himself differently. He feels like the defence and everyone around him knows this is a boy with a bright future.
Yeah, absolutely. He made some really good saves, didn't he? Saves that kind of changed the course of a game, really. There was that late chance where, it was hit and I was right behind that shot, albeit at the other end. And I feared the worst as soon as it was hit. And, he just got across his goal so quickly. And he'd made smart saves before that. I found it interesting looking at his reaction to the goal we conceded, which was obviously it's becoming a classic Swans goal, irrespective of who's in charge. I just was shaking. I was at that end of the ground and just couldn't believe what I was seeing, really. But anyway, it was interesting watching him. He put a hand up straight away. He went to see Wood, who I think was regretting what he did with the throw-in. And he just kind of took charge of that situation. There was no sense at all that he was sulking or feeling sorry for himself, or it was going to affect how he approached the rest of the game. And I looked at all of that and thought, that says a lot for you. It's your first game for Swansea. You're playing at a level higher than where you've been before on loan, and you've made a mistake and you're not letting it affect you. So all of that was really, really positive. I look at him and think he could be a really, really important signing for us. We had to bring someone in that position. And then in terms of Steve, I agree with Steve. I think it's always interesting that when you, dare I say it, you look on social media after a game and you see some people put their player ratings on there, and other people put a sort of general comment on the game, and you're thinking, was I at the same game as you? I think sometimes people see what they want to see, and maybe they want to believe it's unbelievable when it's not, because they're annoyed that Russell Martin left and things like that. I thought it was okay Saturday, and I'm not being critical there. Nobody should expect all of this to fall in place quickly. I think there's a big change in the style, and I thought at times on Saturday we were caught between the two, which is absolutely to be expected. It's there's a transition that's going to take time. So I wouldn't, like I said about individuals, I wouldn't dream of judging how we play under Duff for at least a dozen games and giving him time to build the team. I felt at times at the back I wasn't sure about the three. I certainly don't think Cabango should be in the middle of the three. I like Ben Cabango, but I don't think he's a player who you want on the ball more than your other two centre backs. And I felt at times he looked awkward on Sunday in that role. I even felt on the goal, I was, dead in line with that. And as it was played into him, I was thinking, move, Ben, move towards the ball. And I know that it was interesting that Duff came out afterwards and said, we don't want Rushworth, giving Cabango the ball there. Whereas I guess that's a big difference. Russell Martin probably would have said still play there. So I think that needs to change. And I'd be interested to see going forward when a few of us went over for the day that Michael Duff was presented to the media, and he was asked about his formations, and he said he used a lot of different formations last season at Barnsley, and he wasn't wedded to one. And interestingly, he said, I started the season with wing backs. He said that was the way I wanted to play. I'd used it during pre-season. He said it really didn't go well, and I decided there and then I'm going to change the system. Now, there's no reason to do that after Saturday. It clearly wasn't bad, but I'm intrigued going forward what that might look like. I just thought there were a lot of passes between Wood and Cabango, and I was thinking, where are we going with this kind of thing? I thought Key was excellent on the left. He was full of positivity. It looked awkward at times. There's several times when he was playing that blind ball round the corner because he wanted to use his right. But I want to say this. I feel when Sorinola played that role last season, he would constantly turn back and play back to the centre-back, and it used to drive me mad. We'd never get up the pitch. It was really, really frustrating. Whereas I felt Key on the weekend, even though it's not his natural side, he was prepared to be really positive, to run the Birmingham defender he was up against and get us up the pitch and cause problems now and again. Even if it only ended up winning a throw-in or sometimes forcing a corner, it just felt so much more positive to see that. So I like the energy that he brings to the team, and I like his positivity. But I think the rest of it, is going to take time. I was interested in Birmingham. I was a bit happily disappointed in Birmingham. I expected a bit more from them. I didn't. Some people were saying how they pressed. I didn't think they really did press that much at times. I felt, like I said earlier, Wood and Cabango had a lot of possession between them without really a threat on the ball, and they were almost saying, "Go on then, find a pass," and we didn't quite know how to play through them. It probably looked like what it was, which is two teams with quite a few new players who were trying to find their way. But I was really, really relieved we got a point, Matt. I just think it would have sucked a bit of the positivity out of the place if we'd have walked out that stadium on Saturday having lost 1-0 at home, and not just 1-0 at home, but 1-0 to a really, really bad goal. So I felt that equaliser was significant, and the fact that Yates got it was really good too.
You both mentioned, sorry Steve, just quickly, you both mentioned about how the performance wasn't there, and I do entirely agree with you. But it is quite refreshing in a sense of, especially the last 2 years, how we had to be at our scintillating best to win games. And we did see that over the 2-year period, really, with Russell Martin. You had to be. We'd concede the simplest of goals, and then we'd score a 30-pass move, and you'd think, this is the brilliance and this is the idiocy of the way we're playing at the moment. And we would have to work so hard for a goal. And to see us score what turns out to be quite a simple goal. I mean, Grimes, to be fair to him, is a fantastic pass through to Cullen, takes a touch, picks out Yates in the middle, bang, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere really, because we weren't really under any great control of the game at that point, we've got the equaliser, and it was nice to see us score a goal, Steve, without us necessarily being in a dominant position at that point.
Like you say, I wasn't confident at that point we were going to get anything. So, in a case of just a few seconds and two passes essentially, we've ended up with a chance and it's resulted in a goal. So it does show you sometimes how, I'm all for, trying to keep the ball and dominate, but I think we've spoken about it before, with just the opportunity of, if you spot somebody in, just try and play the more risky pass. And by doing that put Cullen in, and he spotted Yates, perfect ball. And then, if you've got a striker that's a good finisher, then chances like that more often than not are going to result in a goal. So, and it was a great goal, really. So, I think it was encouraging that we got something in those circumstances, I think, because as I said, I really didn't think a goal was coming, but that did turn the game, and we had some momentum then, didn't we?
Yeah.
I mean, what was frustrating was there was a little stoppage, and I think I said to you at the time, didn't I, this could halt our momentum here, and I think
bit of time wasting now,
I think it really did, didn't it? So that was a bit annoying. Stu, I was going to ask you one question, actually.
Yeah.
Obviously, we were close to getting John Eustace as manager, weren't we, a couple of years back? And also, we've played Birmingham a couple of times since he's been in there. I mean, I've got to be honest, I think we may have dodged the bullet because they haven't really impressed me in any game that we've played them. I don't know if you think the same.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that, because I remember speaking to people about Eustace when he was about to come in, and absolutely raving about the way, and I know it was Kidderminster, but his Kidderminster team were playing, and they were seen as, I think they titled the Barcelona of non-league kind of thing, and he was seen as kind of the brains behind QPR. I think he was there with Warburton, wasn't he? And he was had a reputation as a really, really good coach who wanted to play. I guess a couple of things come into head, and I agree with what you said, Steve. I think, sometimes there's, we might call it the Swansea way. I think at Birmingham they want to see a certain style as well of football, and I think it's a really, it's a working class club, but a working class club that prides itself on people being all in on the pitch. And I think if he tried to play open, expansive football there, I'm not making excuses for him, I just don't know how well received that would be unless they were having real success with it. I'd be interested what he'd do with a very different squad of players. And then now some people would say, like, wherever Russell Martin goes, he's playing that way, isn't he? He's not gonna change his style. That is him, come what may. And some people would say, well, if he's like that, what, does he really have a clear philosophy as a manager? But I think there's another school of thought that you set your team up to play according to the personnel that you've got. And, in the past, I've felt that's the case. I think the difference with Birmingham now is they've clearly got some back in. There's been changes behind the scenes. He's been able to bring in a lot of players, some good players too. So I said earlier, I was happily disappointed with Birmingham on Saturday. I expected more from them. I thought lots of people have been saying, they could be a bit of a dark horse, and who knows, they might still be. It's only one game. But yeah, I know what you're saying, Steve. You wouldn't, on the times we've seen Birmingham, you wouldn't look at them and think, oh, well, that's a manager that would fit perfectly at Swansea. But I wouldn't want to totally judge him on that, because I think if he came to us, or had come at the time he was going to come in, when Russell Martin obviously ended up taking it, I do think he would have played a very different way to what we've seen at Birmingham.
Just want to touch on what you said there about managers playing the personnel they've got, and it's interesting. Now we were talking about Eustace there, but I would attribute that as well to Michael Duff. And you mentioned how we spoke about his Barnsley side, how we swapped from wing backs, and we spoke earlier on this pod how we've got 5 different profiles of attacker that can play on the pitch now. Very different players, all of them give you different things, and even how Michael Duff's spoken about the game and the game in general. I mean, in terms of, I want to play football, but also I want to get it forward. I want to make sure the opposition don't get time to breathe. I want to take throw-ins within 4 or 5 seconds. I mean, we could see a real mix here, Stu, couldn't we, of formations, of players. Or it could be a horses for courses deal, where he looks at a certain team we're playing against and says, actually, I fancy we're going to go with a big man up here today, because I think we'll be benefiting from getting crosses in the box.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, contrasting with last season, Matt, it felt that we were so restricted in how we could play. We had no attacking width at all last season, did we? It was the only thing I think Russell changed to at one point was going to a midfield diamond, which worked quite well for a little period. But yeah, he's definitely got options in terms of how he wants to set the team up, and that's only a good thing. And like you guys have said, that Grimes goal, he's more than capable of playing that pass. That's not a one-off. We've seen enough of him to know he has got that ball in him to change the tempo suddenly and catch the opposition out. And yeah, it's brilliant to see that, isn't it? We all love seeing passing football, but someone suddenly playing a ball that takes out 6, 7, 8 Birmingham players and you're scampering clear. That quicker football, quicker attacking football will be, really, really refreshing to watch. And yeah, I'm intrigued about the possibilities. I think at the minute, obviously, the difficulty is where he is restricted is you can probably more get away with playing a right-sided player at left wing back, I think, than you probably can playing at left back, which would be more problematic. So I think when he eventually brings someone in on that side, that will open up more possibilities about potentially playing with a back 4 or a 3 or a 5, however you want to describe it. But yeah, all those things you said, picking the ball up quickly, we want to see that, don't we? We want to see some urgency. And it was really frustrating, as you highlighted, when it went 1-1 and the crowd was right behind the team. We were playing at a quicker tempo, and I thought we're going to win this 2-1. And then someone went down injured. I don't know whether it was when Darling absolutely filled his boots, which was
wonderful, mate.
Which, being honest, was quite refreshing to see. Yeah. And then they made 3-4 changes, and it just, as you two identified, took away that real flow we had and rhythm we had to our game at that point. But yeah, hey, there's always a place for a Harry Darling challenge, isn't there, in football like that? It's good to see sometimes.
Do you want he owed that? Because how they won a free kick after 60 seconds of booting him in the head, I have no idea. And I just thought we're in for a lovely day with this ref.
Oh, Matt, I got
a straight red for us if that happens in the
Matt, I got to tell you about that, right? So I've turned up with my lad Zach, and I said, Zach, do you know what, this season? I said, I'm going to be calmer. I said, I'm not going to...
I said the same to you, Steve.
I know that's nonsense.
Yeah, it was.
I said, I'm not going to get irate about things. I said, I'm not going to get wound up, get caught up in the emotion of the game. I reckon they had 4 free kicks inside the first 2 minutes. Pato was booked after about 3 minutes, wasn't he? Yeah. Anyway, on the fourth fourth one, I was up on my feet in the stand and in an area really where people don't, get up on their feet that much unless there's a goal or something. And Zach just turned his head and looked at me and he said, "That lasted 2 minutes, Dad." And I thought, dear me.
One of the guys was in the same area, same guys come back last. I hadn't actually spoken to him since getting to my seat just before kick-off. And I'd spoken to him and happy new season, etc. And they come literally after that darling challenge where he got given a free kick to them. He turned around and said, "Happy new season to you." And I thought, I just literally picked up where I've left off still. I got in and I thought, I'm going to have a different year. I'm not going to get so angry. I'm going to look at it more with a neutral eye and not be so one-eyed about it. And after, all of 1 minute, I turned around and called the ref also.
Well, in all fairness, you did take a boot in the head, so you think about it was a little bit ridiculous. And the fact the ref just didn't react to it, actually give it against us. You're just thinking, what's going on here then? What's your name? Mike Dean.
It's funny what this game does to us, isn't it? Because to be fair, guys, I couldn't see where the equaliser was coming. I just couldn't see us getting a goal. It was a goal quite out of the blue, wasn't it? And I was sitting there and I'd become more sort of frustrated with it. Oh no, you start thinking, why do I put myself through this kind of thing? And then, a few minutes later, there's that lovely move, that beautiful feeling of when actually you can see you're going to score before you do score. And you're jumping around like a lunatic and lost in the moment. And then you think, yeah, that's why I do it. So there we go.
It's not football, isn't it? It's one of those things you put yourself through and you think every week, I don't know why I keep doing this, but every week you're going to be there. And you look forward to it from Monday morning. It's the only thing you look forward to the next weekend. And
it's a drug you can't give up.
Yeah,
it is. But talking of drugs you can't give up, because we both went down on the midweek game, Steve, as well, didn't we? Against Northampton, and we wanted to see how. Well, maybe if Michael Duff had taken some notes from the Saturday game, the positives and negatives, and see how we do against lower league opposition. Northampton came to town, and let's be honest with you, barring small spells where Northampton had periods of the ball, it was a dominant display, wasn't it? It was a thoroughly professional display on all aspects of that game. I was thinking, wow, there's 6 or 7 players here I could pick out for individual praise. It really was a good performance.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I think Northampton in the first half weren't too bad. They had a couple of moments. I think they just tired really then, didn't they? And then in the second half, it really was men against boys. But I mean, as you say, we scored some nice goals. One in particular, which we will discuss. But it was just some nice moves, some good play, I think. And it was interesting to see him pick a really strong team, wasn't it? I think that was the first thing really for me, because you never really know. Each manager's different in terms of how seriously they take the cups. But I've got to be honest, the cup run suits me. I think this is a difficult league this year. So if we were to take both cups seriously, you can bring a few quid in, can't it? And, it can be a little bit of excitement. And the impression I get is that he is going to take it seriously, purely because, he, at the end of the day, he only changed half the team, didn't he? And the ones he changed, arguably, I mean, Perot started, so did Grimes, didn't change the goalkeeper. And it was quite surprising, but also refreshing, wasn't it? But as you say, we dominated, and we could have scored more, really, couldn't we?
Oh, it could have been twice as many, easily. But I was going to talk about from your perspective on this, on how you see it as a football man in terms of how managers address it, because I agree with Steve. I was refreshed and surprised to see how strong we were. I was thinking also, look at the other aspects of it. Michael Duff's coming here. Of course, he's going to have people that goes, you're going to have the doubters. You've got that Russell Martin fan club, which just won't be shaken off at the moment, but it hopefully will over time. And you've got also a man who wants to slightly change the way you want to play. Very important for him as well to get his first win under the belt and try and get that kind of belief that his way is going to reap rewards.
Absolutely. And someone said that to me today when I wasn't at the game last night, but when I asked a little bit about it, and they said that he wants to get that winning mentality in among the players really, really quickly. I was really pleased that we went strong last night. I think that's important. I think it's nice to have a cut run. I've really been really frustrated the last couple of years when we've gone out with a bit of a whimper. We've had some poor results, and even when there were opportunities, sometimes recall Southampton FA Cup game when they were down to 10 men and we threw that away. I mean, Bristol City knock us out the FA Cup last season, and you inevitably watch, the later rounds, the FA Cup, or even like the fourth, fifth round, quarter final, or the League Cup, and you see clubs at our level in the spotlight, playing Premier League opposition, having a good game under the lights. I want all of that back. One of the highlights, apart from the bloody result of the last 5 years, was that Man City game. What an amazing occasion that was until Andre Mariner intervened. But I'm really pleased that we did what we did, and the draw will be made. Obviously, I don't know when the podcast is going out, so I'll probably screw up the timings by saying this. But
the draw's in a few minutes, isn't it?
In a few minutes, yeah.
We might have the draw before we start recording.
Well, there we go. But I'd love to think we could have a bit of a run in it, and as I say, really, really pleased that he picked a strong 11, and it worked out perfectly, didn't it? Some of the players we talked about who were excited about new signings came off the bench, got some time. One of them scores a terrific goal. I guess it was a perfect evening in that respect.
Well, it was, and I think from Duff's point of view, I'm sure he'll think the same, Steve, in terms of, because the risk when you play a strong team in a cup game early rounds is you don't want to pick up unnecessary injuries or that any sense of tiredness that they cost you. But there was no sense of our players. I mean, Perot was playing like he was playing amongst school kids, and he was a senior pro. It was just ridiculous watching him just dominate the ball, would drop in deep for it and just holding people off. It was almost at one point he looked like Wilfred Boney in his prime. He was just effortlessly holding people off and then sliding it left and right and bringing others into game. It was a side to Pro which I'd not seen before. He really came into that with a lot of confidence and swagger. And Nathan Wood, Steve, he made some eye-catching runs from defence, running through
as he often does.
Yeah, he's very much kind of confident. You're talking about not having Cabango in the centre of the three, Stu. Nathan Wood looked very capable on the ball and bringing the ball out and comfortable taking 2 or 3 players on as well. He had the confidence and swagger to do that. We did have one hairy moment with Rushworth. He did another.
Yeah, we could have had a carbon copy, couldn't we?
Yeah, almost identical.
When you think this, I said at that point, because the first goal was sort of similar to the goal against Birmingham, and then we nearly conceded a similar goal as well, didn't we? But we got away with it this time, luckily.
Yeah, he did, and he held his hand up. This one was purely on him. It was a really underhit pass to maybe Wood. It might have been at the back or Darling, but he really, he picked out for me. He picked out Cullen for the first goal, all of 60 yards away. It was a measured pass, picks him out in a bit of space, and then sends Cooper down the line and crosses for Perot, and fantastic work, Golden, and perhaps a sort of sign, Steve, that's the sort of ball that Duff is going to want to see us play. Picked out long ball out, or that direct pass out to cut out 4 or 5 of their players who are busy retreating, hit them quick, hit them before they can reset. How many times did we say last season, it's all pretty. By the time we get to 25, 30 yards out, they've got 8 men behind the ball. We've got to do it all again. So it's nice to see us go quick, get in behind quick and really pressure. The second goal came from good work down the right again and trying to get in behind, and Perot bundles it in for his second of the evening. And we just everyone, I know the game wasn't televised, wasn't able to get a stream online, but I think everyone who's listening to this pod has seen Josh Guarneri's goal. He might already have scored. I'm really surprised that he hasn't scored, Stu, the goal of the season already at the start of August.
It was a wonderful strike, and I don't feel we've seen enough. People might correct me, but I feel like we don't see enough long-range goals from the Swans. Dare I mention Olivier Cham now, but he had that capability. It reminded me of a goal actually that I think Bersant Salina scored in a cup game.
Ipswich, was he scored one like that against Ipswich? Or was that that was the breakaway goal? Yes, no, sorry.
There was one he scored in it wasn't Northampton the opponents, was it? I'm trying to think who he played in the FA Cup under Potter. That must have been
Man City. You're not thinking of it?
No.
Was it one against Brentford or Gillingham or something?
Gillingham, that's it, Steve. Gillingham, I'm sure it was Gillingham.
I remember us giving him a hiding. Yeah, he did score a screamer. You're right.
It's Saturday afternoon. But a wonderful goal. Just absolutely flew off his boot. But then the bit before it was great to see when we've really lacked someone who can take someone on and beat someone. Can go past someone either with a bit of pace or a little bit of trickery. That's where it felt last season with the personnel we had. We were always playing in front of teams, and it had to be that perfect goal. With 3, 4. Fantastic passes and great movement, which is which is great to see, obviously. But you want to have an alternative. You want to know that Josh Key might go past his fullback here. That we can create a little bit of something with other means. So really, really, really positive all round last night. Hopefully, obviously, we can. It's a completely different opponent, but we can carry that into Saturday. The players must have a bit of confidence.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you mentioned Josh Key then. I think he'd obviously made way for Abdullah last night, who played on the left-hand side. But again, he put in a solid performance. He could have and should have scored, really. But again, he could have scored 7 last night. And I don't think anyone would have really said that was unfair, because it was just a dominant performance. But thinking back to Key, I mean, he was up against Ethan Led on Saturday playing, and he was on the wrong side, and he won our man of the match, didn't he, Josh Key? So it is a testament, as you mentioned earlier, about how hard working he was on that side to get around and challenge his man. He had a hard task. So it's nice to see, Stu, if and when we do bring that left wing back in, which is clearly a number one target for us, that we've got someone as versatile as Key who can clearly function either side.
Yeah, 100%. And I think wouldn't it be nice to get someone in with similar attributes on the left as well? I felt that held us back. We keep harping back to last season, but it's a valid comparison, especially when we played with wing backs a lot last season. But we just really, as Steve said, we ended up playing centre halves there. Or Soronolu was obviously a real disappointment, and it just felt so negative at times. We really were crying out for players who I think in that position are almost first and foremost, I think they're attacking, not defending. And last season it felt as if that was flipped on its head. So yeah, Josh Key, even in the Bristol Rovers game, which I didn't think we played very well in, and it was disappointing, I looked at him that night and thought, well, you've got a bit of pace. You've got a bit of urgency in your game. You want to make things happen. Yeah. Your first thought seems to be, can I go forward? Not can I keep the ball and be safe? So yeah, all of that's really encouraging with him. I get the feeling that he's going to be a really popular player at the club. Obviously, when Connor Roberts was here, he, for other reasons as well, given his affinity with the club, being there a long time and from the area, all the rest. But Connor played with that passion, didn't he, and that desire to make things happen. Hey, on that note, by the way, on the Connor Roberts, I didn't know Harry Darling was suddenly taking long throws on the weekend. And Zach turned around to me and went,
I saw one or two. I was thinking,
he said, I didn't know he could throw I didn't know he could throw a ball that far. And I was thinking, I've never seen Harry Darling take a throw. And suddenly he's launching it into the penalty box.
When he would say under Russell Martin, it's definitely not going to be a Russell Martin tactic, is it? That's no.
I guess not. But it was just, hey, especially if, the Niko's out there, the Ukrainian strikers. Yeah. I don't know, to mix it up sometimes. I even remember with Connor under Steve Cooper when he was launching the long throws, and it had been
like Barnsley, didn't we? I remember on Sky.
Exactly.
He went in, and I think Cabango headed it straight in. It was brilliant.
That's it, Steve. And it's a sort of thing that, being a bit of a purist, I'd have really frowned on with other clubs for a long time, and sort of thought, oh God, look at that.
The truth is that I think why it's so effective is because you can't really practice defending it in training, can you? No. Unless you've got someone yourself who can launch one in there. And I mean, look at Wales. Obviously did it against Croatia. Yeah. Wales did it against Croatia, didn't they? Didn't play great, and look, everyone knows my thoughts on Robert Page, but a ball has gone in, someone's flicked it on, and then Broadhead's nicked one in at the far post, and we've stolen a point. I mean, they can be very effective. I think what I would say is I wouldn't want that to be our default, our main aim of the game. But
no, that was the difference with Steve Cooper, wasn't it? It got to the point where you thought, actually, we're playing for this now. We're trying to get into these positions where we can just launch a hopeful one, and I don't feel like that's I don't feel like that's going to be. Yeah.
It's an added bonus, isn't it, as opposed to like a main tactic, I would say.
Yeah, it's just nice to mix it up at times, isn't it? You don't have to do everything short and certainly not everything long. But it was just, we just had a little smile to ourselves. Thought, wow, didn't know we could do that.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, I guess we'll see what these players can do now. As you say, it was one way, very much one way. And we spoke, it must have been about 18 months ago now, when we played Barnsley away in Russell Martin's first season, and we won 2-0. Two late goals. We'd had about 89% possession, about 17,000 passes or something ridiculous, didn't we? But everyone look back on that as this is perfect. All these goals, all these passes, this possession, these goals, they've won the game cleanly. And I thought, well, no, until we made those, I think both subs, I know Cham was one, I can't remember the other was, but both players came on, made the goals.
Yeah, we didn't create
was the other one.
We didn't create much, did we? That was the issue.
And it was like, it looks good on paper, but a lot of things sometimes, Stu, I find can look one way statistically on paper as opposed to what you're seeing with your own eyes, isn't it? And sometimes you're watching a football match thinking, yeah, that's great. We've played that safe pass, and that's another 7 or 8 passes on the chalkboard, and he's now got a 98% pass success rate. But he's not going to try that pass, Matt Grimes, that he did on Saturday.
Yeah, it's interesting, like you say about the stats. I looked at them for the Birmingham game after the match, as I often will, and while we had markedly more possession than them, I think it was 59%, which I don't think will be our default set in that. I think that was almost, as I said earlier, Birmingham sitting back quite a bit. The only times there was obviously little triggers where they pressed, and Woods, unfortunately, Woods throwing back to Rushworth was one of them. But generally, I didn't think they were really getting about us. But I looked at the other stats, and shots on target, shots off target, that kind of thing was all really, really even. And I did feel it was a fair outcome on Saturday. I don't think Birmingham had some good opportunities, didn't they? And we had a header off the bar. There was an almighty scramble that somehow didn't go in. So I don't think we could have a
disallowed goal as well, which looks onside in the end.
Yeah. I was slow to recognise that. I always think, well, look at people who are still celebrating. I think you buffoons. How have you not seen the flag? But
you were one of them.
I was one of those buffoons.
Yeah, I saw it straight away.
Well, it's right in front of you boys, isn't it? That flag, is that right? Yeah. So
we've all had them. I remember on the final day of the season when we needed a goal to get in the playoffs, and Trundle bundled it in the last minute. It's gone absolutely bonkers, and then someone's pointed out.
To be fair, that was the other end of the stadium.
It was the other end, but still, I was just like, I don't believe this. Like, the King has scored a last-minute goal.
I was on all day for the playoff final that year. I was the only person in the stadium secretly celebrating Trundle's goal. It was under Sousa, to be fair. I don't think playoffs would have been ready for us anyway, would they?
Yeah, so the context here, Stu, in about March time, we were about 10 points inside the playoffs and 10 points off the top two. So
it's the most entrenched team in the playoffs in the history of the league.
So we've gone for a few pints on a Friday. He's gone, I've just booked it all day. And he's given the date, and I've gone, you do realise that is over the playoff final. The look on his face was just priceless.
And there was no way we were going to go up automatically or drop out of the playoffs at this stage. We need an almighty collapse. And as it happens, we had that collapse.
We had 2 wins in the last 10 or something, and we slipped out right at the end, didn't we?
Well, there's another sliding doors moment, right? If all that doesn't unravel in the way it does, maybe Brendan Rodgers doesn't come in the next 7 years in the Premier League, and promotion before that doesn't happen. So
all these things.
Yeah, for some reason things just worked out in that era. Like you'd be gutted about something, but then something better would come along, and you'd do it, and then you'd like stabilise again. It's just it's a bit ridiculous, really, but. Yeah, I do remember that quite well. You were a bit concerned, weren't you?
Yeah, of the 15,000 or so on the final day, that was the only Swans fan leaving with a wry smile on my face, to be honest. I think we drew 0-0, didn't we, in the end?
Yeah, we
needed the win.
Which is very fitting under Sousa, because there were a lot of 0-0s.
Yeah, Trundle was the best goals to game ratio in the league by some distance, and only got on the pitch about 7 times, if I recall, because Sousa preferred players who didn't score goals. But yeah, it was that was a really random one. But yeah, I think in looking back to Stu, you saying there about stats not always playing out the way you see them and the way the football goes. I mean, you'd be happy to give up a percentage mark or two of possession there, wouldn't you, to see us be a little bit more cutthroat when we get the ball? Oh, absolutely.
Some people are very critical of Russell Martin. I had a lot of time for him. Don't get me wrong, I had my frustrations last season as well. And Steve knows that. There were times when I thought we needed to pass forward quicker and it was too slow. But I had a lot of time for Russell Martin. I thought he was a good coach and a good manager and a good guy. But there was nothing more infuriating than after a game, kind of looking at the stats sometimes and seeing the amount of possession we had, which we knew with our own eyes. And then, seeing the scoreline, or even sometimes seeing the opposition having more attempts on more shots, and you just looked at that and thought that can't be right. You can't have that much control of the ball and then still be so vulnerable. And I do think Russell, if he'd have had some support in January, that could have looked different. We didn't have the attacking players, but coming back to your point, Matt, absolutely, it's not. I want to see good football. That is a given, but it doesn't have to be 70-80% possession. I want to see goals scored. I want to see things getting me off my seat, and that's what we're there for, isn't it? Without getting too deep about it all, it's a form of escape, isn't it, for us all as well? We go along on a Saturday, you're giving up your time because you love the club, but also, you want to have a bit of fun, you want to enjoy it, and there's no better feeling than watching players or a way of playing that gives you that excitement. So, I'm just glad we've got in some players already who feel like they could make a difference in the attacking third, because last season sometimes you look at the bench and think, where are we going with that? And whereas now you think, I still think Liam Walsh has had a nightmare at Swansea. There's no two ways about it. He's hardly played any football, but people at the club last summer before he got his injury were saying, he's looked superb. He's a really good technical player, Liam Walsh. And, you think you've got him to come back into it. If we could get Joey Allen fit again as well. And, he talks about who came off the bench last night. It does feel like we might have a bit of depth to the squad as well, which is going to be obviously so important, as we all know, in the Championship. So, yeah, definitely at the minute, Matt, glass half full.
Good man. Looking at it, I'm almost going to get, I don't think, Steve, this season I'm not going to make any predictions of a starting 11 because there is so many options. I'm almost getting as excited to see the bench as I am the starting 11 now, because you often look at a team and go, well, that's great, but if we're chasing the game, what can we bring on? And you're looking at it now and you've got quality on the bench like I've not recognised since the early years in the Premier League, really, where you had that depth in the squad. Looks like, and it's not unconfirmed, it's still very much rumours stations at the moment, but we could be getting Charlie Patno in on loan, Steve, and that, again, is another bold, progressive, attacking signing for the Swans if he comes in, and a signal of intent after we found out that disappointing news that Olivier Ntcham decided he wasn't going to play on Saturday by letting Duff know on Friday night.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think anyone was too shocked that Ntcham was capable of doing that. Look, I don't think he's the best character to have around. I think the frustrating thing is that he is a man of immense ability, but there's a reason why he's been at Swansea, and it's because his application hasn't been good enough. So I think, all in all, if he didn't want to play, the best thing to do was to get rid of him. I don't know if he's officially gone yet, is he?
Well, they've pictured him signing.
Yeah, they have. The club haven't announced it. Are we waiting on? Is there some sort of international clearance to go through?
Absolutely.
Look, it's going to happen, obviously, isn't it? But it does seem a little bit odd in that sense. But look, he will be a loss for the games where he does actually do something, but he's not Mr. Consistent. So yeah, I think Charlie Patino is quite an exciting one. He was at Blackpool last year. He had moments where he did well. Still a young player, isn't he? Learning the game, obviously, needs to gain experience, but. Yeah, I think that's quite an exciting one. I think there would have been other clubs in this division interested in him, so we'd have done well to have pulled that one off. And again, it's just given us that extra little bit of depth, really, isn't it? And that competition for places and
fierce.
Yeah, but you would have thought that he will play. He would be first choice. Maybe not Saturday, but in general, I think he will be in the team.
You're looking at that midfield. As it stands, like Grimes, Fulton, Cooper, Pato, who played before. I think he's probably the fall guy here at the moment because he didn't do much on Saturday. And look at the players. He came on again last night.
Well, it's another player you can't really trust. That's the truth, isn't it?
Yeah.
How many good games has he had in the last year
not since that first 4 or 5 months that he joined, didn't it, really?
Exactly. That's the problem, isn't it? So, I think a lot of fans probably aren't hugely fussed at him, and I'm probably one of them.
I had that same opinion actually last night when I was looking at their team and thinking, I wonder how good we're being and how poor Northampton are as being a league below us. And I looked at whether I was over-assessing some players' performances, but then I watched Pato and I thought, no, Cooper has been that good and Cullen has been that good because Pato was standing out as being nowhere near as effective as either of those. But Stu, what a lovely luxury to have these options that we can on the bench. There's going to be players on there who think they should be in the starting 11 and have a point to prove every time they come off.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Ollie Cooper's an interesting one, isn't he? He had a great impact last season. He obviously scored that superb goal against Cardiff. And he was playing really well for a period, deservedly got that contract. And then he just fell away a little bit, I felt, which I think is totally normal to happen with a young player. And let's be honest, the Swans fell away as well. So none of that makes things easy. But I just, from what I heard last night, it sounded like he was really, really good. And I wonder if he sort of saw Patterson coming in the team on Saturday and Cham leaving the club and thought, there's an opportunity for me here. So I thought that was really, really encouraging. When he's on his game, I really enjoy watching him. I think he's a player who makes things happen, who makes positive runs. So that's really, really good. I think the midfield area is very interesting. And, just reading up a bit on, I've seen little clips of Charlie Patino, and I didn't really know loads about him. And it's interesting looking at, I just reading an article that was done in the app. I knew we'd have done something on his loan period there. And it says, at the turn of the year, his 27 interceptions were the most by any English teenager in Europe this season. So that's obviously last season it's talking about. And he played number 6 and number 8. I had in my mind him being a bit more attacking than that. So, he's clearly going to offer another option in that area. And, he talks about his pressing, which is obviously a big thing in terms of how Duff plays. If I'd say one area at the minute, guys, other than the obvious left wing back, I think at centre half we might be a bit short as well.
Yeah, we're going to play 3. We definitely need more.
The next one is we've got Norton and Brandon Cooper, haven't we? And I mean,
Cooper's not getting a game time last night.
I'm assuming that. And I mean, from my point of view, Norton shouldn't have had another contract. So yeah, they definitely need to bring someone in there.
Yeah, that would be, I think, and a left footer it would be brilliant. And obviously they're hard to come by. But again, I just think that would give the team so much more balance, especially if you play with a 3, but even with a 4. So he's going to need to bring someone in there. And I think it probably wouldn't do any harm for that to be someone with some experience. And I'm not talking like, no disrespect at Norton's age, but, Darling, Cabango, Wood are all relatively, they are young players.
Yeah, young, yeah.
So it would be good to get someone in about 27, 28, really, who's still hungry and wants to achieve something, at least 30 and under. But just I think that would make a difference with those players. Who knows? Something could still happen there. It wouldn't overly surprise me if someone came in for Wood. We'll have to see. And I guess that's the thing we're juggling in at the minute, isn't it? We just don't know what that team's going to look like until at the end of August. And I do think, I know managers moan about that, but I do think it's ridiculous that the season starts and you play these sort of 4 or 5 opening games with that hanging over you that everything could suddenly change. But yeah, as we've said all along, the good thing is that we if that does happen, hopefully we're not being reactive to things.
Yeah, well, I mean, what I've been most impressed by, Steve, is we've seen all the players that have joined the club so far in one way or another. And well, let's go off the list. And if you would list them, probably come at the top in terms of what come with the reputation and what was Harrison Ashby. And he had another really rusty game last night. It wasn't dreadful by any stretch, no one was, but he wasn't finding his man. He let a couple go out of play. He didn't beat a man at all really last night. He was very but I was thinking, if this guy is going to be the eye-catching signing that we expected, and when he joined, Steve, I mean, this is probably the weakest performer of the new signings so far. And in terms of that, the ceiling that he's got is supposedly so high. We're going to be really excited about when he settles in and comes good. I mean, we haven't seen it yet, but it could be massive.
Look, he's a youngster who's, he's had to move a long way from home. He hasn't been here very long. I think we just, as we've said, we just got to be patient with it. But I do agree he has been rusty so far. But
if he comes good, that is huge, isn't it?
There is that, but if he doesn't, it's the feeling of Josh Key is there.
Yeah.
So that's the other relief, isn't it? You're not looking at people now and thinking, well,
he starts every week.
If he doesn't come off, then where are we going to turn then? So that's the most important thing, is that this guy, we're hoping he comes off, and if he's as good as what the reports have been, then brilliant. But if he isn't, I don't think it would be the end of the world either. So that's the good thing for us now, is that by strengthening the squad, we're not panicking too much, and we're not over-reliant on people, or we hope we won't be over-reliant on people. So that's a big positive.
And on the face of it, Stu, not one filler so far. Everyone's come in. Everyone looks like they're going to add something to this squad.
Yeah, and that's so important, isn't it? It's you want to bring players in who are going to make you better, and that's stating the obvious. But yeah, bringing players in who, I think we've done a few loan signings, haven't we, in the past, where they've had such a, you look at Finn Stevens last season.
Yeah.
Flex, wasn't it? And then obviously Sondergaard in January, which was literally completely pointless, because you get the feeling that Fisher had thrown one in the net, he still wouldn't have been picked.
And then there was Finn Burns from Man City, the January form, Reece Williams, Liverpool. Players who just are making up the numbers almost without being unkind to them. And clearly, in some of those cases, there would have been an expectation that those players would have performed better than they did. And when you're doing loan deals, that's always obviously a concern as a gamble. I know that clubs, certainly at championship level, never like taking someone on their first loan. They like someone to have gone somewhere else first, and almost another club to have had the difficulties with that player adjusting to, new teammates, new manager, new club, new city, like Steve said, with Ashby moving a long way. So, and the other thing, obviously, with loans is it's short-termism, isn't it? That they're important, and I think you should use them because sure as hell other championship clubs will. But it's really good when you see players coming in and signing, 3-year contracts, and you're thinking, okay, that's an investment for the future, because we all know the situation at the Swans. We have to sell clubs, sell players to survive, to make ends meet. Really, there's obviously a shortfall every season. And so you've got to be developing players and bringing them through. And obviously Flynn Downs was an example of that. And Perot is proved to be an exceptional signing, obviously. So, yeah, the loan's good, but I think you want to also be bringing in those other signings like we have done. And I hope the left wing back will be a permanent signing. I know we've been looking at, it's been reported that we've been looking at Sam McCullum, the Norwich player. And I think they wanted to get a replacement in first, even though he's not in the team, so to speak. But to have an understudy for whoever is operating on that side for them. But I'd just be all for someone coming in. And look, we obviously missed out on Buchanan, didn't we? But I looked at what Birmingham paid for him and the length of contract they gave him, and equally, I wouldn't want to go that far. I think you've got to be sensible about these deals and not be held to ransom on them. So. We'll see how it goes with Ashby. I just think it's really important that we sort of, when I did my list of things on Sunday, sort of reflecting on the game, another change, I thought I won't come out the ground and go straight on my phone when I'm, emotional and prone to saying more than I should. But I was looking for one on Ashby, an emoji for patience, and I couldn't find one. But that's what I would have said. I just think, let the lad settle a little bit. Yeah, he hasn't said it light in the first 2 games, but it is the first 2 games, and he's clearly a very talented player. Newcastle wouldn't have paid $3 million for him if that weren't the case.
Well, so all accounts, he had a cracking pre-season out in America as well. And I think more than anything, I'm excited to see if he's as rusty as he is now, and we're not seeing it yet, then we could see something really great coming in late in the season if we're looking at all these other positions and how we've strengthened and improved across the pitch. I'm just in this dangerous position still, where we don't really have as Swans fans a start of season where we're looking at it thinking, oh God, this is a really positive vibe and a kind of sense of a new era perhaps in the ownership structure and how we're doing business and stuff, and things start to feel good. And do you know what, Stu? It's leaving me a little bit uneasy because I'm not sure how to deal with that emotion.
Well, we've had, certainly if I reflect, obviously Steve mentioned about the chaos of Wilfred Boney coming back and Llorente going at the end of that terrible window. But, then the following season, it was an awful mess, wasn't it, with Graham Potter? We're going into the Preston game. I remember being overseas and on holiday and just being sad enough to have the notifications on it just flashing up with, another one gone, Jordi Amat gone, Fernandez guy. It was just a long list of people, and obviously Joe Rodon. It was great. He got an opportunity, didn't he? And but at the time, I think he was the only centre half other than Van der Horn left the club. So that was a mess. And we know what's happened in, under Russell Martin, under the windows, where the club have not really. They've made a pig's ear of things at times. I guess the only window that we had that was remotely positive, I recall when Trevor Birch did really good business with McBurney and Dan James early on in that one, and then Cooper was able to bring in using his contacts, some really, really good, loan signings. But again, that was kind of, it's always going to be short-termism with that, as I said before. And I think when Russell Martin came in that summer, 2 years ago, it just felt quite a mess, really, the squad. So yeah, it's positive. Let's hope that we're still feeling upbeat, after West Brom on Saturday.
Well, let's talk about West Brom on Saturday, and Steve, because I guess we could call Birmingham a mixed bag. I think we all agree that a point was fair. We didn't deserve all three, but certainly created enough to warrant getting a point out of that game. And it was a balanced game. And we move on to Tuesday just gone, and we see that sort of polished performance that we were hoping, albeit against lower league opposition. And now we go on the road to the Midlands and hoping for perhaps a little bit more of a Michael Duff team performance than we saw against Birmingham, where we see the sorts of passages of play which we've seen in fits and starts, a little bit against Reading, a little bit again and against Northampton the other night, and those moments where you think, I can see what he's trying to do here. I can see why he's had success with this in the past.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the other thing would be that, I mean, especially in the second half the other day, I didn't think Birmingham offered a lot, whereas you look at West Brom as a home side, what they finished above us last year, they'll probably still have ambitions at the playoffs, even though I think it'll be tough for them because they've lost a few players, but they're likely to have a go with us, aren't they? So sometimes that can suit us a little bit better. So I think it will be an interesting one on the weekend. But yeah, as you say, we're still just sort of trying to build, aren't we? And players settling in, getting used to each other. So I'm not expecting brilliant things again. But I'd like to see more encouragement. And you certainly think after what happened in the midweek, where a lot of the first choice players did, at least, even if they didn't start, they came on sub, won't do any harm for confidence with it. So, but this is going to be a tough game, isn't it? I think if we came away with something from this game, I'd be quite pleased with that. I mean, I know last year we did go there and win. It was a great win. And obviously we nicked it quite late, didn't we? So probably one of the highlights of the season, although of course the standout would be a different last minute winner. But yeah, I couldn't help but mention that. But look, it was a great one. And obviously we haven't played them that long ago when you think about it, because the last game of last season was against West Brom, wasn't it? And that ended in the same way with last kick of the game. So, yeah, we'll see, won't we? It'll be a tough one, I think, up there. But the interesting thing now is a few players playing well, as we said in the Northampton game. Then, it gives the manager a nice sort of headache, doesn't it?
Yeah, very much so. It's interesting Steve mentioned West Brom at the end of last season, Steve, because I think it was the journalists' line of, well, if this is the last time we see Joe Pirou, then what a fitting send-off it was, scoring that last kick of the game winner. And now fast forward a few months and Swansea get new investment and show impetus to the transfer market and progressive signings and even rumours, I say rumours, it was came straight from Michael Duff's mouth that they are actually willing to sit down and discuss with the club's hierarchy the potential of a new deal. I mean, that is still very much on the case of if no one else offers the club's valuation of the man, which is kind of out there as the worst kept secret in football, really, that we are willing to sell. But the idea that we are toying with the idea of adding to his contract as it stands is another sign that this club is trying to handle itself a little differently now. It's again optimism. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, realistically, this should have been done after the first season, shouldn't it? Stating the obvious. He had a really good first season, and there would have been no reason then for the club not to try and get him on a new contract. I think they were late trying to do that, and I don't think it's been easy negotiating with Pirou's people either. So I'm not saying it was straightforward, but I think there would have been an opportunity to do that if they'd have been prepared to. I say push the boat out with the money. I don't think they'd have had to gone crazy with it. But anyway, look, that ship sailed. I think the only way that he signs a new contract now is if there's a relatively low release clause in there. You have to be realistic about that. Pirou, giving Pirou significantly more money a week would be just bringing him short-term reward in many respects in terms of what he could potentially earn by, joining another club. So, a lot will depend, obviously, on the level of interest that there is out there, and if something doesn't materialise late in the window, and that could be at Premier League level, a struggling Premier League club that gets off to a bad start and is suddenly crying out for goals, or I think I still think one of the relegated Premier League clubs in the Championship this season it could be a destination for Pirou. If anything like that doesn't happen, then yeah, you could see a scenario potentially where Pirou signs a new deal with a low release clause, and I think people would have to accept that's what it's going to be. He's not going to sign a 3-4 year deal without some kind of written assurance that if a club comes in January or at the end of the season, he's got a relatively clear passage to go. Because at this moment in time, obviously, he could sit tight and wait till January and then, be in a position to agree a pre-contract with, with a club overseas, or he goes on a lucrative free next summer. But I think the real positive at the minute, sometimes in these scenarios, and we've seen this, with Obafemi, let's be honest, was a right pain in the ass last season. And disruptive things in a way that you can't underestimate. We haven't seen that with Perot.
Not at all.
You talked about him where he applied himself. Obviously, I didn't see last night. Obviously, saw Saturday, and I've seen glimpses of pre-season. He's been fully committed. And hey, if he's got any sense, he's trying to score the goals to get him his move, isn't he? It'd be foolish for him not to. And I'm quite happy for that to carry on, because I know I've seen some people saying, look, if he don't sign, no worries. He could be our ticket to promotion. I'll be honest, I don't see it like that. I just think that's financial madness. That, to me, feels like a huge gamble when you're talking about Michael Duff coming in. This is his first season, and thinking, let's roll the dice and hope that Pro can score the goals to win promotion. And if he doesn't do it, we just write off, whatever it is, £8-10 million. I don't think Swansea's in a position to do that. So, for the minute, I think it's just positive. He's got all the incentive to go and do well, play well, score goals, and that helps us in the short term, trying to put points on the board at the start of the season, and it might help us in terms of increasing his value if he stays and signs a deal with a release clause. Brilliant. But for me, the worst case scenario is he goes on a free next summer.
Well, I feel like, and I know Steve mentioned earlier about feeling like we would do the business we expect to do, as opposed to previous transfer windows where we thought we might actually not do the most obvious piece of business here. It does feel like now we're feeling that the people in charge of doing the transfers have got a sensible idea of how football works. Before we finish, just a quick fire for both of you. Perot, Grimes, Wood. How many of them are here on September the 3rd? Steve first.
2.
Cool.
I think Grimes will go to Southampton.
You reckon?
Well, it looks like Ward-Prowse is going. I'm assuming Lavia will go. They're going to need players then, aren't they? I interpreted Grimes' words last week as a bit of a come and get me plea. But I hope he takes Southampton to the cleaners. They've got the money. And also, they were tossers in terms of the way that they've dealt with the Russell Martin thing. So
we'll get his money another way by charging 25
Well, no, I still think we might get the money that we're more than entitled to. But I also now think, be prepared to not take the money from them and make them pay over the odds. Stitch them up. It's exactly what they deserve. If you're going to take someone's manager, just pay the fair release clause, because you're going to cause a lot of upheaval to a club. To try and pull a fast one, it's just not on, is it?
There's a Southampton fan and podcaster actually I follow on Twitter, and started following after this Russell Martin saga, and was chatting during the summer, and he was really upset today that West Ham had agreed terms with Ward-Prowse before they'd agreed a fee for him, and I replied saying, it's not exactly how you've got your manager, by the way, because we still haven't agreed a compensation deal for Russell Martin as he's sitting in their dugout. But hypocrisy, eh? Steve, what about you? Wood, Grimes and Perot, how many of those three are going to be at Swansea?
Do you know what? I can give you an answer to that without saying who, because I really don't know, but I fear it will just be one of them left at the end of it, and I hope I'm wrong on that, but that's just my feeling. That you can make cases for all of them for why teams would want to sign them. I think especially Grimes in Joel Perot. I'm kind of been resigned to Perot going, so I'd be really disappointed if Grimes left. I know he sometimes gets a bit of stick from the Swans fans, but I love Matt Grimes. I think he's been a really underrated player and servant at the club. And he's brave. He gets on the ball, even if he's having a difficult game. I know he'll still go looking for the ball all the time and won't hide. That pass on Saturday was further evidence of his ability. So I'd really hope he stays. But I agree with what Steve said. It's important that the club take a really, really strong stance. And we've had, the word that we're not under pressure to sell, that kind of thing. However true that is, I don't know. But in certainly dealing with Southampton, given it's been really, really problematic over Russell Martin, and we still don't know what we're going to get in compensation. If they were to go for Grimes with a load of money burning a hole in their pocket, which is clearly going to be the case, then we really should be driving up the asking price. He's got 2 years on his contract, and that plays into our hands in a way that it doesn't with Perot. So, yeah, as I say, fingers crossed it is only one of them that goes. It'd be disappointing to think it'd be more than that.
Or did you mean one would go or two would go?
Sorry, so I was saying I think two will go. I think
you think two will go.
Yeah,
I'm gonna hold it because I'm holding the optimism candle on this new investor.
What's gone wrong? How can you be the
Oh,
optimist?
you know, right? What happened as this podcast? So I'm not effing and blinding every 2 minutes, but I'm looking at the way the club has handled itself during the summer and how they've gone about their business very quietly, under the radar. People are finding about names when it's already done, which is very unlike us. Well, since following the Swans, really, even Hugh Jenkins wasn't like that, was he? In terms of keeping things dumb. So on that note, I'm going to say that we're going to have all three, which would be, wow, what a statement that would be. And I hope let's obviously, we all hope that I'm right in that one, because that'll mean that the club are, obviously, squad will be so strong as a result of that. But we'll see. We'll see. It will be very interesting anyway. There's a lot of business to be done. And for once, it actually feels like Swansea City are going to be the ones doing the business throughout the transfer window rather than just on deadline day, which we've become accustomed to. So keep it close here. We're going to keep an eye on what happens around the transfer window, and of course come back to you after the West Brom game on Saturday, where we hope we get the first league win under Michael Duff. A massive thanks, Stu, for joining us this evening. It's been great chatting to you.
It was a pleasure, you boys. Good to speak to you both, and hopefully be back on again during the season, and look forward to seeing you at a game soon.
Yeah, we'll be talking about the promotion party, and no, I'm only joking. It's a long season. There's a long transfer window left to go yet, but we'll see what happens. We remain optimistic and hope this is a new dawn and a new era for Swansea City. We'll be back next week, as I say, after West Brom. But until then, have a lovely week and a weekend. I'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye.